Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith along with Jensen Rideout. Great to have Jensen as our guest. Let me just say a couple of things before we get started. Episode 159, actually, as far as recording, this is our fourth recording in 5 days. Episode 156, we talked about fundraising. And just want to let everyone know that it's been positive. We had quite a few replies. And we need to do more with our campaign, but we love the fact that people want to help us help tennis. But let's go with Jensen Rideout, 21 years young, from Salt Lake City, Utah. Father is Benji. Mother is Allison?
Allison.
I met Allison one time at the Memphis Open. She bought your brother Aiden and Spencer Johnson big yellow tennis balls. Memory. Oldest of 5, right?
Yes, sir.
Tennis family. Your father, Benji, played at BYU, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what a competitor. He came to Memphis, and at one point in Memphis, a group of us went out. It was, I had a coach, an intern, eventually 2 minivans of players. Pretty good players. One was an Orange Bowl champion. You know Spencer Johnson. He's going on to UCLA. Just think of when I went to Memphis. It wasn't just an old bald-headed guy. I knew if I showed up, it's like, who's this guy? But I showed up with a little team. Your dad showed up, and he loved it. That it was temporary, but the place we were staying, we were on air mattresses, and let me just say it wasn't fancy, but he loved it, and I think he would have liked to just stayed with us and hit tennis balls.
No, he would have stayed the whole year.
As his own tennis court. Tell me, your mother, she's a nutritionist. She's doing a lot with high school tennis?
Yeah, so she's the head coach for the boys and girls high school teams, Corner Canyon, Utah. So it's located in Draper. She's been doing that as far as my recollection goes. She's been about 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. She's had some good success, and she's coming up on her next girls season, which is starting right now. So we're going to head back home and go help those girls win a state championship.
Girls in the fall, boys in spring, and they just won a state championship in the spring, the boys.
Boys just won our first one, yeah.
Your brother, who's a rising senior, and then Alex Fuchs was on the team.
Yeah. We lucked out there. Alex
Fuchs, big serve. He's at Ohio State now. And I think he's still going strong in the back draw at Kalamazoo. Tell us about how does it work with, is it 6 singles, 3 doubles?
Yeah, so the year before they had given us, we were in a different division, they'd gave us 4 singles and 3 doubles, which gave us a lot more options for stuff. But then we just barely changed divisions again. And so now in our region, we're back to 3 singles and 2 doubles.
And can you play both? Singles and doubles, or you can only play one?
Yeah, so you can, we can put you pretty much wherever we want. There are some regulations now with UTR and stuff. We need to make sure, some teams had some problems with stacking a little extremely. And so we had to make sure that we were putting people where they needed to go. But some of these guys you can use interchangeably. So last year we had a boy named Bo, and he played singles, doubles for us, just depending on who was there in the roster that we had. But it's fun. It's fun. They get to compete in different positions, and then all we got to do is just set them for what they're going to play in state. They're going to play doubles or singles.
And your mother has a camp? Is that a feeder system to the high school?
She runs in my opinion, it's a very successful camp. She runs it during the summer, all 12 weeks, and it's all ages. You wake up, we got kids there about it starts 8:00 in the morning. And you go an hour and a half. We got boys and girls hitting together. Some are in the high school ages. And then after that hour and a half, you get down to the middle school ages. And then, 3rd, 4th hour, you're down to elementary school, pre-K. And, we get hundreds of kids to that camp. And we got great coaches down there as well.
And asking you to be on the podcast, Jensen showed up. I haven't seen you in a number of years. And I was just, what would the expression be, blown away by the command you have with the information as a teacher teaching is information transfer, but also the command that you have as a coach, the way you're a great communicator and how you instantly have a relationship with kids. Really, really impressed. One of the coaches, perhaps this the beard, the fact that you have some big shoulders, you certainly, you don't have the wrinkles to show for it. The coach said, how old is this guy? And I said, you guess. And he said, 31. I said, no, he's 21 years old. Plus, let's talk a little bit about the last couple of years. I mean, you've been away from tennis. Tell us about the experience you had through your church with the Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, so I'm a Latter-day Saint, and I chose to serve a 2-year mission, and I chose to serve during COVID, and so because of that, I had 2 missions. So I got to serve in New England, so Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I served there for about 16 months, but my original call was to Thailand, and so I got very lucky. At 18 months they keep you there, and they say you can't go anymore, and so. At 16 months, I got an email that said, we just cleared your visa and you're going to Thailand. And it was the most amazing experience. There's a lot of poverty there, but it's life-changing. I'm 20 years old, and I get to go out and I get to just share my faith, help other people. And, tennis was in the back of my mind all the time. The time I spent with you, you think about it all the time, but, that it shapes who you are. And so I'm grateful for those 2 years.
With maturity, I think of college tennis years ago, the South Africans, the Swedes, the Germans, and other countries, you had to serve your country for 2 years. And, so I think especially with boys, so many boys are not ready for college at 18. I think a lot of people would be surprised. I spent years, who you know very well, Spencer Johnson, and he just got back from being in Argentina.
He's a changed man.
I was talking to your brother on the phone the other night, and he said the same thing. I like the expression from the Mormon Church. It's not about you. To be altruistic, to give, to take that time out, and obviously I think with tennis, rightfully so, an individual sport, it demands a certain amount of selfishness, to really be successful at tennis. I have a few jokes I share about the Mormons. LDS, I was asked, the late Tommy Fye, we worked together for Vic Braden. He invited me to Salt Lake, and I just fell in love with the mountains. And a woman asked me if I was LDS. And I said, yeah, I think everybody is to a certain degree. At that time, I was working in academia. Or just prior to that, I finished at a college that I was at throughout the 80s. And Phi gave me the elbow. I thought she meant LDS, learning disabled students. She gave me the elbow and said, no, you idiot, Phi. She means Latter-day Saints. But over the years, I've certainly taught a lot of Mormon kids. I teased, and I was actually with Alex Fuchs and his mother, and we were at Chick-fil-A, and I said, I think everybody works here as a Mormon. Because, I tease Mormons, what do they do? I mean, they use electric shock, because the children overall, it takes you back in time. It's refreshing because they're so well behaved.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it the electricity? I mean, is it electric shock?
It's not as bad as people say, but no, it's true. They, from the time you're little, you're taught exactly that. You're taught to help other people. And being selfish is, it's something that you get called out for it. That expression, I've heard that my whole life. And one of the things that my mother used to say was, I think they'd say is, are you third? So for some people it's, are you second? But they say, are you third? So first would be God, second would be your family, and then you would be third. So you're putting other people before you.
Yeah, we don't swear on the podcast, but I'm from the Northeast, and in the South, they switch the letters around. They just say dadgummit but actually with profanity. When a coach swears, supposedly their heart rate goes down. And then when someone would say "God damn the rain," I don't think they're really taking the the Lord's name in vain. They're just having a conversation with the Lord, is that they don't need rain at that time. And I do think the Lord has a sense of humor. Here's another Mormon joke I share all the time is when you go fishing, you only take one Mormon with you. When you go fishing, you never take one Mormon with you. I got to learn how to tell a joke. You never take one Mormon with you because they'll drink all your beer.
Yeah.
But if you take two, they won't drink any beer.
Yeah.
Actually, I probably shouldn't say this for those people with Andy Fitzell. He's a member of the LDS Church. He served a mission. If you listen to I kept going. He said, okay, let's go for the record. So we have a 4-hour podcast. And if you listen to the very end, it's very moving. It just reflects Andy's background with the LDS Church. With that, we talked about beer drinking in episode 157. And it seems like it was just a minute ago because we've done so many podcasts the last few days. Is Dave Watts asked me if I were to invite people to a table and for dinner or whatever. I got around to, well, what would the meeting be about? So improve American tennis. And I would have to say that halfway through the meeting, I said, forget the food, we'll just drink beer. I would substitute Andy Fitzell out, and Dave Anderson would be somebody who would get honorable mention, but I would pull in Richard Hernandez. A guy like Jimmy Rogers on, he'd be a little bit too much, but Hernandez, he would just growl like a bear, get everybody's attention. When you are assigned, you have no idea where you're going. So don't you think you're very fortunate to go overseas?
Oh, very, very, yeah. No, but you're fortunate to go anywhere. You really are. And anybody who has been anywhere on a mission, if they really went for it and gave it all they could, they'll come back. And they could have gone to Boise, Idaho, or Bangkok, Thailand, and there's a light in their eyes. They saw a world that they weren't born into, which I think is so crucial for anybody at that age. 18, 19, 20. You got to go places where you aren't brought up. You got to bloom where you're planted sometimes.
Here's another Mormon joke for you. Jim McMahon, great quarterback. And the reason he wore sunglasses is I think his younger brother, it was an accident where he was poked by a fork and he had to wear sunglasses. I think a lot of people thought he wore sunglasses because he was a rebel. He was a rebel when they told him he couldn't wear a headband. I think it said Nike. And then what he did the next week is he wore a headband and had the commissioner, I think it was Roselle. But they asked him, what's your favorite thing about BYU? And he said, leaving BYU. But quarterback they had a coach, Ariel perhaps. I can't remember. That can't be right, but they threw the ball all the time. One thing that helped football players at BYU is when you take the mission, you can come back and you don't lose eligibility, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
So, I mean, actually, straight across the board, I mean, I think society would be much better off if once young people got out of high school, they had to give for 2 years. With that expression to be born a teacher, that also, I think the LDS Church, I remember Sam Olson was a student of mine a long time ago, and he made a presentation. What was really important is to try to help people become better speakers. So in the lab, we had 15 hours a week. We had rainy days. And by the time someone graduated, just in a 2-year program, we wanted them to be able to, conduct a 60 to 90 minute presentation. But maybe it's changed. At one time, I think it was maybe chauvinistic is too strong a word, but the men at a very young age in the Mormon Church are asked to speak.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I mean, we're talking young as like 5 or 6 sometimes. And you might have someone up there to speak with you and talk in your ear a little bit, but yeah, they've been getting in front of crowds since they were little.
Well, then also too the way it works, the joke, you have the priest, the minister, the rabbi, and all the money's thrown up in the air. But the leaders of the ward, they're not compensated by the church, correct?
They're not. No, they literally. It's very interesting. They're almost volunteers at some point. Now, I mean, they don't volunteer for the position, obviously. In fact, there's a lot of jokes that go around that. When you get a phone call to be a stake president or a bishop, it's funny to ask, and am I the fifth person you've called or the fourth? Right? Because the joke is that three or four people have already said no, and they're like, because it's such a responsibility. I'm personally very grateful to the stake presidents that I have and the ward leaders that I have. They work hard because it's like what you do. You're taking care of a family of people. And they all got problems. They all got kids and workloads and things that they got to take care of. And it's your job to essentially make sure that they're still getting fed the right information,
Now, coming back to Sam's presentation, and this goes back to the early 80s, is you have to keep a diary. And then say, for example, fortunately, if Father Time, and at one point I did work in a cemetery, it's a terrible thing when the older bury the young. But say if the grandfather passes away, family members sit around and read excerpts from the diary.
Oh yeah. It's it's not like we're telling people, if you don't keep a diary, you're kicked out, but it's something that's encouraged, and it's encouraged, I think rightfully so. I think everyone should keep a diary. I really do. Keep a journal, write things down. I remember on my mission, I made a goal to write every single day of my mission, and I did. And so on the flight home, I had a 22-hour flight home, maybe a little bit, actually 25 hours. And you can't watch anything. You can't watch a movie. You can't do anything other than read your scriptures or sleep. But there's nothing wrong with reading a journal. You go back, you see how much you progressed in that time. My mother I'm pretty sure she has diaries of like her great uncle when, we were moving over from where we originally from to Utah. I believe my family was in those wagon carts when they came over here.
Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
He started in Palmyra, New York.
Yes, sir.
I once went to Palmyra. I taught Matt Davis how to teach tennis, and that's where he's from. And there was a county fair. I never realized that how people would wash a cow for the fair. But yeah, he went. Joseph Smith was initially in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And then he moved to, I can understand why someone would move to Salt Lake from upstate New York. The weather's pretty brutal in upstate New York.
So he actually passed away before they moved.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was Brigham Young that led him across. And you ask anybody in the church, they'll tell you Brigham Young was probably the only guy who could have gotten everyone over there. Joseph Smith, a great guy. But. See,
I was giving Joseph Smith all the credit all these years. With communication, though, written, verbal, that's a gift that you have. Retention for our listeners. You periodically, consistently. I mean, how do you use the educational content that we have?
I'm on it every day, and I don't understand how someone can watch it once and just get it all. I've watched it 3 times, and I still, if you were to ask me, sit me down, quiz me, and test me, I still don't think I would pass, because it's.
You would pass. very much so.
I mean, but regardless, I'd rather tell myself that than I need to keep watching it, because you go back and you watch it again, and there's something that you miss. There's something that clicks. There's something that that makes more sense in your mind because you've seen it, you recognize it. I remember you telling a story a long time ago when we were in Memphis of a kid that came up to you and said, "Hey, Steve, I just completed the course." And at first I was like, oh, what an idiot for coming up and telling you that, because he's boasting and bragging. But now I'm like, what an idiot for thinking that he retained even 5% of that information. It's like there's so much. It's you were talking to these some of the students that are here. There's so many gold nuggets in there, and your notebook is only so many pages long.
I remember asking your father. He was there for I think it was a long weekend, say 4 or 5 days, and I mean he was still ready to just compete and play with anybody there.
Oh yeah.
It was good to go and fit as a fiddle and sleeping on his air mattress and loving roughing it. And I said to him, "What percent do you think the kids are retaining from this experience? And I remember his answer was, if it's 1%, it's great.
Yeah.
If it's 1%, it's great. There's a young boy that we're picking up tomorrow from Portland, Oregon. And his dad talked to me the other day, and he reminded me of a clip we have. I believe it's on YouTube called Back to Basics. And that's where we have to do a better job with sharing content. He told me that he looks at it all the time, and you couldn't. His point was you just couldn't watch it one time. And again, we get frustrated when people say, "Well, Steve Smith stuff is like, this is how Welby Van Horn started students," and then you just see the progression of how the players are playing. When we put it together, the Tennis Intelligence Applied, we found out that a lot of times people only take the course if it's connected with a sheepskin. In other words, they're only going to take the course if there's a degree at the end of it. And actually, the length of Tennis Intelligence Applied, which is 25 hours, like 365 clips, a clip a day, because people weren't completing the course. At one point, going way back, we had a webmaster, and he knew that we had more people from the U.S. signing up for it, but we had more people from Serbia completing it. He just that's what he knew from the numbers.
Yeah.
But also too is you only know it if you can show it. You only know if you can say it.
Right.
And it's like tennis math and numbers from the tennis court, and it's just building blocks. Mm-hmm. One of the short courses we have, I take the role of the dummy. That's a line from Vic Braden. He said, I was asking a young student questions. I mean, obviously I knew the answer, but the point is, does the student know the answer? You're here, you brought your younger sister, 10 years old. We just had a group, Team Minnesota, 4 players from Minnesota just came here. And one of the girls is 8, your sister's 10, and she's teaching 3/8 system balance, and she yells across the 3 indoor courts to me, "Hey, Steve, I got her to fix her toe." And, I mean, to me, that's just gold because, the 3/8 system, and your sister wasn't doing that, but that means on the forehand side, on the backhand side, that her hips were locked.
Yeah.
You don't make that slight adjustment step with the back foot, the anchor foot, the adjustment foot. Tell us about high school tennis. Do the kids play other sports in Utah? Do they play full-time tennis?
Yeah, it's hard. The kids I don't really want to call them kids. The students that we have, they come to us and they've played tennis here and there. And, I religiously repeat this quote to them. I say, if tennis coaches were doctors, people would be dying in the streets.
Welby Van Horn quote.
It's great. It's fantastic. And I say that to people and they laugh, which to me gives me a little sign they kind of know. They kind of have to know a little bit what we're talking about sometimes. And so they'll play lessons here and there, but the best players that we have, the best students that come to us are multi-sport athletes. For the girls, it's soccer, and for the boys, it's basketball. And so for the girls that come to us as students and they want to learn to play tennis, they want to, play high school either for fun or sometimes they're competitive and they want to get better. The best ones who retain the information, probably the best, are soccer players on the female side. And then the boys, it's the basketball players, hands down. I have a few students of mine who are really competitive basketball players. They travel to, they go to Vegas, California, and they'll go travel and play these big basketball tournaments. And they improve like this. And part of it is just because I think when I tell them and I sit them down with the lessons and the structure of it, is I say, look, I'm your piano teacher. So I'm going to teach you how to practice. You're going to have a piano at home, right? You're going to have your racket at home, and I'm going to show you what to do. And then when you come back in a week, we're going to see if you improved or not. And what these kids don't realize is that you can tell immediately the ones that do it and the ones that don't. And there's a trend. The ones that do it are normally the multi-sport athletes, the ones who have a bench, and the ones who, if they don't do what their coach says, they don't play. And they understand that concept. And it's so funny watching these kids who come back and they think that we can't tell. I get some kids who come back and they just immediately, they remember unit turn at the body, go down, pet the dog. They go out to the cone. It's the first thing we teach is just the cone. And then the other kids are like, okay, what did he have me do last week? I remember I turned, and then they're going through it so slow and it's choppy, right? But one of the principles that I'm constantly reminding them is, look, go practice it, even if it's wrong. Because even if it's wrong, if you're coming up and you're doing this and you do that 100 times at home, you're going to come back in a week and I'm just going to do this with you. And I'm just going to fix your wrist. Now you're doing it correctly because you've done it 100 times, right? But if you haven't done it 100 times, you're going to come back and we got to start at square one. We got to do it all over again.
With the Soviets, the big red machine, they all started with gymnastics. I know this from my older brother, but because he studied Russian hockey. To be a master of two sports, I would say that my two boys, by the time they each were 10, they were a master of two sports. It didn't really stay with it, one because it was circumstantial. They were, they were taken out of hockey, and I, turned the clock back. But the thing is that I took them skating, and they became very, very good very, very good skaters. And because of that, they couldn't play house league. They couldn't play recreational hockey at a really young age. I mean, it's very interesting, but it's like, no, they can't play in this league. They skate too well. They just get the puck and just go. No, it just wouldn't work. But just staying the course. But I meaning by being a master of two sports, you're very proficient. That doesn't mean, okay, you're ready for the NBA if you're playing basketball, but you're way, way ahead of the norm for your age. And basketball, I mean, it's such an inexpensive sport. Now here, we have no basketball on the mountain. We'll find a way. It's not very expensive to find, okay, is there a parking lot where you can put up 2 basketball hoops? But we have basketballs already here at the tennis center. You can put out cone, right foot, left foot, right hand, left hand, forwards, backwards, one-on-one, no shooting. In fact, Alex Fuchs, that was something that was recommended him to a year and a half ago, was play basketball, don't shoot. Just play defense.
Yeah.
Just for your agility. Big guy with a big time serve. But usually the big guy, that's what they have to work on. The little guy will have that movement. But tell me about skiing though. That must help athletes. Don't all people in Utah ski at first?
You would think so. I don't tend to get as lucky I don't tend to get as lucky for 2 reasons. Because number one, normally the kids I teach, they don't ski. The second problem is that if they do ski, tennis comes second. And so then I rarely see them. And so they'll go out and ski, and I get texts, a week before saying, hey, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks and we're going to be up in the mountains skiing. And so then tennis just takes a back seat to that.
Djokovic, he grew up, his father and mother, they ran a restaurant at the bottom of the ski hill, pancakes in the morning, pizza in the evening. Federer obviously skied. This kid's center. You just think about being in that position that we're in right now, sitting in a chair. You get at the top of the hill. With your young sister, we did all sorts of lower body work this week.
Yeah.
I love the Spaniards, 50% tennis, 50% fitness. In tennis, people come to see us and we end up having to spend so much time with the upper body because it's basically a lot of times what we do, it's a rehab center. They come in, we film them, and it's like, really, to be nice, their game's a train wreck.
Yeah.
Okay, you got a palm up serve, you got the butt cap on your forehand's almost hitting your earlobe. There's no inside out on either ground stroke, and they write down they want to be a college tennis player, college tennis and beyond. It's pretty expensive to ski though, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. I bought a snowboard for the first time in my life and took one look at those prices and I was like, I'll wait till next year.
People mention snowboarding and I say, people would laugh. I've never skied, but I grew up not too far from Lake Placid. I went to a prep school that had its own ski lift, but hockey players never skied. But yet And it was very easy for me to do this. I grew up on a lake, and I had to go home from prep school and make sure I had a junior water ski. You take the fin off. This is what we did back in, this is the 70s. I mean, I graduated from high school 50 years ago this year. You take the fin off a junior water ski, and we would drill a hole with a rope, and you could just lean back. It's almost like snow plowing. And it was just, that's the only time I've ever gone up a ski lift is at on Sunday. The only time we could do it, a few of us on the hockey team would go out, and we could instantly snowboard because of that rope. All we had to do was lean back. And to see what they're doing now, it's, it's amazing what they do.
Yeah.
I think I always told this about snowboarding and skiing, that in due time, the pickleballers will have their own facilities, because when the snowboarders, when that sport started gaining popularity, the skiers were pretty upset.
It's already happened. We have full facilities in Utah dedicated to just pickleball, and you'll see them. They're in strip malls, and sometimes they just have whole buildings, but it's everywhere. It is everywhere.
With Utah, what a beautiful place just to go hiking. I was in Utah for a very short period of time. The late Tommy Fye, he loved pro shops. In fact, he used to come to Tyler Junior College to run a pro shop seminar. And he was a Braden staff member when I was. So he asked me to come to Utah. I go to Utah, I look at those mountains. And what his goal was at that time, he was going to try to have 4 pro shops, because that was when pro shops were leaving. It wasn't like every pro had they still call it a pro shop, but it's not a pro shop. So it was one of those things. He was going to do it with his girlfriend at the time. And it was a project that, got pushed to the back burner and didn't come to fruition. So, but I went to Utah. I did some things for the Utah Tennis Association. And I remember Tommy was at a place called the Cottonwood Club. And a kid by the name of Corbin Archer. So I make a video for him. And he ended up going to play for Craig Tiley, the Connection. And, so he graduated from the University of Illinois. And so Peter Mallett, an Australian who's living in Salt Lake, his wife was an airline stewardess, a very good tennis player. So Peter Mallett is my Utah story for you. Peter Mallett calls me up, and I go, oh no, because Peter was Corbin's coach. Mm-hmm. And he said, hey, mate, I saw that video. And I was going to go, I thought he was going to go, well, because I get in a lot of trouble just making a video. But Peter goes, can you make one of those for me? He goes, I've never been able to hit a bloody forehand. And he was a really good tennis player. So I go, sure. So made a video for him, and he obviously very, very gifted. And I'm drawing a blank. It'll come to me. There's a kid from Utah, top player in the world, 2 hands on both sides. Should be able to just rattle this off. But I can remember high altitude Peter. Peter was in 35s, and he was good. He would he was still beating this player because he was a serving volume, and if he just got one sniff of going to the net, that ball's up high once, he'd come in and play an approach volley, again, high altitude. So he was at a place called Canyon Creek. So Fi's at Cottonwood Club, nice family club, and Peter Mallett's at Canyon Creek, which I get it was leveled, and now it's no longer, but it was the place in town. So Dave Anderson, who's been on the podcast, and Craig Tiley, they were working with me. And Tiley had a problem with his visa, so he had to be a student. We got him a student visa in South Africa when he was coming to Tyler Junior College, but he left early. He went to Europe for a few weeks. But he left so he left South Africa without a student visa. He entered the U.S. as a tourist. And that's not a simple thing, at that time especially. So the way the tennis industry works, if you have a PhD, you're an expert in everything in tennis. You have a PhD. So Tiley, he obviously is so proficient as a student. the goal was, okay, Tyler, you'll get a PhD. The three of us wanted to do this project called Tennis Town USA. And there was someone who Tyler had researched who was working at the University of Utah, professor. So it's like, okay. And we just felt like we were in this small area, Tyler, Texas, and the neighboring town, Longview, that we could go to a city. And what we thought about Salt Lake was very isolated. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd lived in the Miami area and I lived in the LA area, and it's pretty difficult. It's not that we had to be the only show in town. Like when I was in Tyler, Texas, we were the only, in a lot of ways, we were the only show in town. But it's very difficult in the place. I mean, I spent so many years in the Boca Raton area for the consumer to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's not that there's better tennis, there's just more of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's academies are like 7-Elevens. So long story short story long. So there's two clubs. Salt Lake Tennis Club was the third. So we were in with Tommy Fye's club. We were in with Peter Mallett's club. So, and I was the one who went to Salt Lake to make it happen, where Tyler and Anderson, they were covering the fort in these two small towns in East Texas.
Tyler was studying at the time too, right?
The whole time he was with us, he studied. He came over with a degree from Stellenbosch. He went to the 2-year program. Then he had to go to UT Tyler to have the 4-year degree to go to grad school. So then he got a master's from UT Tyler. That's one of the reasons that he ended up 7 years in Tibet, 7 years in Tyler.
Wow.
So both these guys, I mean, one's, they're both very, very competent, but one on the court, Anderson, and one off the court, Tyler. And it fits that Tyler's the CEO. He's a super, super organized guy. And, charisma and all that. But so Salt Lake Tennis Club, like one of the oldest clubs, if not the oldest club, they're looking for a pro. And this is where the Mormons, it was a little bit of a white lie. The Mormons fibbed. So it was very smart. And this is a great industry story, tennis industry. So I'm called up and they want to know, because I threw my name in the hat, because I was thinking of the goal was we'll bring pros to Salt Lake. What a beautiful place, quality of life. So a woman calls me up and says, I'd like to have my daughter take a tennis lesson. I understand that you've submitted a resume. I said, yeah, that'd be great. I said, I don't give one lesson, you have to take 2. And she asked why. I said, well, on the first lesson I film, and then I make a film, send it to you, and then you come back for the second lesson. So that's what happened. But it wasn't her daughter. She was one of the teaching pros on the Salt Lake Tennis Club staff. So that was a fib. I didn't know it. I found out later. And they apologized. They wanted, so smart to say, okay, we want to have someone go take a tennis lesson from the people. Okay, we've got to have our short list, and you have to go through this interview process. Really, when a pro is interviewed, it's unfortunate that the pro's just sitting in the room answering questions. It's like, let's get on the court. Let's see what you do. We're going to give you a beginner and come back an hour later, see what happens. So the first lesson's taken, I film, second lesson, and then there's a meeting afterwards. And I go to a meeting at Salt Lake Tennis Club. And if there was one, there was 20 people in that room. And what they did before the interview is all 20 were there and they watched the tape that I made. And then the question is, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, we're on a mission. Not as significant as the mission of the LDS Church, but seriously, a mission. And we'll talk a little bit about Memphis. That's how I met you in Memphis. That was a mission. Because, well, if we go to an isolated market, I have someone like Anderson and Tyler, self-motives. Here's 2 competent guys that, Anderson 8 years, Tyler 7 years. And we go to Salt Lake and we'll make tennis happen. Yeah. And it's not LA, it's not Miami, we're producing players. That was presented to me one time with, there was discussions with the outfit in Minneapolis, Lifetime Sports. At that time, maybe they still do, they control 8 clubs. And, it was discussed where would I come in and be the director of player development and pro education. And, Minneapolis, it's not a hotbed for tennis.
Yeah.
So Anyway, I go into this meeting and said, no, this is what I'm doing here. Is that, I just said with Tommy Fye and Peter Mallett, and all the clubs should have synergy. They should all be working together, and instead of all the infighting among pros.
So much.
But what happened, and I'm sure it's changed, but there's a lot of positives to it. But at that time, and during that time, I was called by Roger Seguzo, Robbie's brother, and then had the opportunity to go to Boca Raton to run this academy. Dave Anderson went with me, and then Jennifer Roberts. Now it's Jennifer Roberts Morgett. She was part of our program, and before that was Scotty Perelman, and before that she played at Illinois, and she became the coach at Illinois. And because of that connection, that's how Tyler got in at Illinois.
Got it.
So he went on with the idea. When he went to Illinois, he didn't go in to be coach. He was the director of instruction. And he got the chance to be the interim coach because the head coach was fired. And the rest is history with what he did. It was amazing. It's an amazing story to go from obscurity to a national championship. But Jensen, what happened is that after the meeting, I would say it was split. And there's a lot of people said, we need to go in this direction, but I wasn't a Mormon. What is your thought on that, at the end of that story?
Getting baptized is really easy.
Yeah.
Fix your problem right there. I'm just kidding. No, I got no comment on that. I think it's stupid.
But I would think now, Salt Lake is no longer a city. It's not.
It's got subsections, subcities, all of it.
But with that, at one point, years ago, this goes back to very, very early 90s. It was predominantly, the percentage of the residents was Mormon.
Yeah.
But that was, 30 years ago?
I know it's gone down significantly, but
but with that, the beauty of Salt Lake, that's what happened. With Memphis, a group of us went to Memphis with the same idea. I actually was in Minneapolis one time to work for Lifetime Training Coaches, but it was about the same length of time. Actually, I would say a little bit longer in Memphis, where the idea was to go work with inner city kids.
Yeah.
And one thing, from a selfish standpoint, I think it's very important. If there's a meeting, is to put the agenda on the table. Is Bobby Miranchek set it up where I met with Andy Andrews, and he was the incoming president of the USTA before I ever went to Memphis. And he just assured me, if you go to Memphis, I will make sure that monies are dedicated, monies are spent on what you need to make tennis happen.
Yeah.
With the inner city kids in Memphis, a pilot project. But what happened is his daughter fell victim, and she eventually, unfortunately, sadly passed away. But what comes to your mind when you think of Memphis?
That's where we first met. Other than gratitude, which is the first word that comes to my mind, I think that is really where I learned to teach, was in Memphis. And it was during that time that all this stuff started to kind of click for me. But I really do believe this. I don't think I would have been able to complete my mission had I not come and lived with you in Memphis. I really don't think I could have, because we had long hours teaching all hours of the day, and sometimes teaching kids that just don't want to listen and that are just there because their mom and dad wanted them there. And I was so grateful for that time, because I got to be around you. I got to see the way that you handle those situations. I got to be around high level players, beginner players, and I just got to be in an environment of development, which doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in a lot of different places. And even on my mission, I thought that the mission that I was in was greatly lacking in actually developing even just other missionaries. Teaching is a skill. And, I apologize to all the elders and sisters that are currently serving, but just because you get set apart and you get a name tag on you doesn't mean you know how to teach. And it doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the room either. But it's so easy for kids, especially my age, to think that once we get that tag on, now we know what's going on. But you don't. You have no idea. And I talked to, you have a great intern, helper, assistant here, Yvonne. I was talking to him. Scholarship goes unrecognized all the time. And it goes unrecognized by the people that need to know it the most. And that's the same for people in my church. That's the same for people in tennis.
Well, what do you mean scholarship goes on?
People, I mean, I could list off, names of, I'm very interested in theology, but just keeping it to tennis, you could list off all these names of people that no one knows. I talk to a group of kids. I say, Welby Van Horn, do you know who that is? No. Jim Verdick, you know who that is? No. Dennis Vandermeer? No. Nobody knows. And then you even talk to older people in an older generation. I talk to tennis pros. I talk to everybody, because that's one of the things I learned on my mission is that there's good information, there's bad information. You should listen to all of it. Don't reject it. Listen to it. Think it out in your head. Process it.
Yeah, it's good. Filter through it.
Yeah, exactly. Because why? Then you're just going to start rejecting everything you don't like. It's not even going to be whether it's true or not. It's just if I don't like it, I don't need to listen to it, which is a poor habit. But just getting back to that point, people go to painstaking lengths to study and to produce scholarship and knowledge and to get it out in the world, and no one reads it. And the only people who read it are other scholars, are other people who have done the same thing, who appreciate it, who are dedicated, who are interested in it. And it's an absolute shame. And that's just the way that the world is, as far as I've been able to perceive. And I talk to a lot of scholars. I have great friends of mine. Friends is a strong word. I'm connected to people who are scholars, and we talk about this all the time. They go through so much work. No one reads it.
Well, to me, a scholar, the beginning steps of a scholar is someone who's reading, period. Yeah. Jocks like myself, just reading what you have to get the grade.
Read.
My old man used to tell me all the time, I'd be studying the hockey news. Of course, I didn't listen. I mean, how's it go? Thomas Jefferson, man uses 10% of their mind 10% of the time. And I would know how many penalty minutes week by week, how many assists, how many goals week by week, just all this useless information. And, those are the only numbers I was interested in. Yeah. Later in life, I got interested in tennis math. But documentation, just the tennis director at Wintergreen, Steve Campbell, we would say he's a Bradenite. He worked for Vic Braden. He has photos of what the clay courts look like when he got here. He has photos of what the windscreens look like. He almost didn't take the job. The people here, they think did a lot of great things. And this is not a shot at Ferris State. I mean, I was there 3 times. I think it's great that the students take 4 years. They take student loans. So what happened here previously, they hired graduates of Ferris State. But also then you get into compensation and perhaps, they were just paid. Really, their pay was heavily based on commission from lessons and not really being a caretaker. And I mean, if you're in charge, like Steve Campbell now, 16 clay courts, I mean, you're a gardener. Or you're in charge of other gardeners. Every clay court has a mind of its own. But he has documentation of what the place looked like. We have documentation, and I sent it to the president of the board of Tennis Memphis. For our listeners, it's a nonprofit. And the city of Memphis has 60 indoor courts. They have 4 indoor centers with a total of, I think, 4, 8. You see, they had 4 and 4, 8. They have 12 indoor courts. It's a city to have 12 indoor courts. But we have documentation of, what transpired there. And I was there 21 months. I went in as the directing consultant. And what's that mean? A consultant goes in and tells you what the problems are. A directing consultant goes in. They tell you what the problems are, and they stay there to fix them. But the amount of poverty in Memphis. One of the facilities is in the second poorest zip code in America, and it's like, whoa.
That's Whitehaven, right?
With there's Eldon Rourke, there's Leftwich,
Oh my gosh, I forgot about Elton Rourke.
Leftwich. There is Eldon Rourke is in Whitehaven, but no, it's one of the other places. Senior moment, you gave me give me a second, I could think of it. But now the city lost the pro tournament. That's where I met your mom, and your younger brother Aiden was there. And when they lost the tournament, the facility now, I believe, I know it's been leveled and it's townhouses. But the university and the city, I think they're opening doors any day. Sometime this upcoming fall, they have a new $20 million facility.
Wow.
But the one thing about, our tennis content is free lessons, free content. And tough thing, I think it's much easier to pro bono to give people free lessons. But the tough thing about junior tennis is it's not so easy to get kids to tournaments.
Right.
Transportation, accommodations, food. With on the end of this tape, I did this for years, 4th of July. 4th of July, actually printed out, and we have a copy of the national anthem. And so I have everybody sing leading up for a week, and then I pick out, it was so easy to pick you out. It's so easy to pick you out. It's the end of that tape, but you saw it, right? It's very moving.
I watched it, yeah.
What's your comments on just on that tape?
I mean, when you first showed it to me, it's emotional watching it because you remember all of those kids, like all their faces just start flooding back, and you do have memories, right? I have memories of being with those kids and teaching them, and you reminded me of Kartik, who I forgot about, who could get up. He could stand up without using his arm. He didn't need to cross his legs. He could just stand right up, which was amazing. And I remember
with Kartik, I communicated with him the other day. He's a rising senior. 2 years ago on dirt, he was right there breaking a 5-minute mile. He's a tall, lanky kid. Has a good base.
Yeah.
Ask a question. What's better, to have great serve or have a great nerves? A little bit of a rhyme there, serves and nerves. And but no, I remember, just like so many kids want to win so badly. I mean, you can mention anybody, the battle of when he hit a backhand, his left hand was way underneath. And for every flaw, there's a counter flaw. And because of that, he had to pull outside in.
Yep.
But yeah, I could go through that tape as well. The gentleman from Oregon, his son's flying in tomorrow. He was telling me about the tape. I didn't have to see it. Then I said, please send it to me. But I could tell him where the story goes. In other words, it's amazing how if players start with us, but they don't stay with us. A lot of times, this is very good for the listeners to hear, is people think, well, I did the basics, now I can move on. And you never outgrow. You just keep building upon. Obviously you're a musician. I mean, I think at the end of the podcast, I need to ask you to sing here. We have had Chris Clore, Fergus O'Rourke sing on our podcast. You have an amazing voice. But with, you just have to always stay the course. Tell me, go back to high school tennis. I asked you about the conflict. You're working with a team and then dealing with the private sector. What do you want to share with listeners? How you answer that?
Yeah, so, Steve knows that, the students that come and work with me, they're being taught GreatBase, and we're very strict and technical and mechanical. And then, they're going to go to the sports mall. They're going to go to the Salt Lake Tennis Club because they're playing points there. And there's tennis pros there and people there who want to, everybody wants to have an opinion and everyone wants to chime in. And I get a lot of students that come to me and, they come back and they'll say, well, my tennis instructor told me to do this. And it's either twist the doorknob, you go to the trophy pose on the serve. It's, old stuff, scratch the back. And I just tell them, I say, look, what do I want you to say? Or what do I want you to do when someone tries to change something on your stroke? And I just kind of test them because they're all like, you want me to ignore it? You want me to just say no? I'm like, no, I want you to listen. And I try to make a point that whoever that teaching pro is, they're trying to help that student just as much as I am. And it would be completely unfair for me to say anything otherwise. Right. And the last thing that I would want is not only a poor reputation of being a coach that has snobby students that think, well, my coach knows more than you. And my coach said to do this and I'm going to do this. I'd so much rather teach a rising generation of kids who know how to take information, internalize it, reflect upon it, think about it, and then come to their own conclusion on it. And in all reality, if the information that I have is good, then it should play out that way, because good information is good information. It's just the way it is. And if it makes sense and that kid can see how other things don't make sense, that's going to be such an improvement to that kid's ability to critically think, which is that too is a dying skill. Critical thinking is not something anyone is just born with, and people have all these presuppositions, and I could talk for hours on that. But teaching kids to think and teaching them to listen and teaching them to appreciate when someone's trying to help you, rather than being, wanting to spit back and be like, well, my other coach said this. Well, my other coach said this. It's stupid. I think it's just stupid. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of that coach's time, and it'd be a waste of my time too. And so I don't want to have students that do that.
Oh, that's so well put. With cell phones, I tell kids all the time that it's a dream killer. I don't think kids daydream. Right away they go to their cell phone.
Yeah.
And, just the ingenuity, the creativity, Einstein, imagination is greater than knowledge. I can remember years ago, we saved broken hockey sticks because we knew in the spring we were going to build mini nets, and the moms would give us some old sheets, and our whole spring break, we were going to play street hockey. But we were going to have these mini goals and, go to I remember the Burton Street School, and, we have 4 of them. So you can have 2 games going on at once. You can have a tournament. And we didn't really have that much to do. It's like, well, what's your opportunity? We have to make our own fun. But no, I think that's great to have an open mind. Sometimes we say an open mind needs to be closed for repairs, but I think it is best for the kid to figure it out on their own. I know that I was in the Tampa area for a long time, and people would call me up and say, well, should we go to, we're thinking about Saddlebrook or Voluntaries or your place. And I used to say, well, why don't you try to do both? And that way they'd have a comparative experience. And they just came to our place and they never went to Voluntaries or never went to Saddlebrook. They were just, one was slightly to the north, one was slightly to the south. Car ride away, 30 minutes one way and 45 minutes the other. That, as far as retention, it's interesting. Some people, when they see a technical video, they just get it.
Yeah.
They just get it. And, that's where you don't have to have all the bells and whistles. If you just have the information, and then how it's presented. And I think many times there's too much hype as well.
Yeah.
And how it's being packaged, how it's being sold. But that's so well put. I do a couple of things you said. It doesn't make sense for everybody to put in their own 2 cents. But at the same time, Mark Twain, every time you meet someone, you meet your master. You can learn from everybody.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
We use ideas from tennis teachers that I know, for example, they don't really understand the study that Braid made, which is science, dimensions of cohort, physical laws. Share with the listeners, we have 2 boys from Montreal. They've been here for 3 weeks. You and Yvonne, we had intervention. We sat down, we talked to them. Then today we put it on film.
Yeah.
I'm meeting with their parents tomorrow. It's an exit meeting. They've been here again 3 weeks. And I say, okay, you guys, you're going to tell your parents tomorrow. I mean, I can be heavy. I can be the velvet hammer without velvet. But why don't you tell the listeners what your advice was to those guys?
I mean, we can't say it enough. They're great kids. And I think they know that. I think they know that they're well behaved,
And well parented.
well parented. And my advice to them, the first one, and I think this needs to go for everybody. I remember you telling me this, not personally, but I remember you saying this, is that you need to go find someone to teach. And I think for their situation, especially, they're two brothers. I have a very similar situation with my younger brother, Aiden. I would go practice with him all the time. But I know as an older brother with a younger brother that relationship, it is possible to get too comfortable with one another, right? And being responsible for that person, that stuff can fade. And so what I told them was, go find someone else to teach, and I even emphasized to them tonight at dinner, that person doesn't need to be a 4-year-old person ever picked up tennis in their life. Teaching can be nonverbal, right? I asked them how many students does their coach Patrick have, and they were like, hey, he's got about 12. I'm like, great, you got 12 kids right there. You can invite one of them, say, hey, me and my brother feel like we're gonna be at the court at 7, right? Because they got to get up early, right? It's such a bad habit that they sleep in, and so they get up early. They now have a responsibility to someone other than just the guy sleeping in the bed next to them. Which, how easy is that to roll over? Be like, hey, you want to get up? No, okay, go back to bed. And that's brothers do that, that. And sometimes you get a rare case where brothers are just on top of each other, but not in this case. But now they have a responsibility to someone else. And on top of that, teaching someone else, it teaches yourself. You are transferring the information and being able to see how someone takes in information and being able to help someone to grow outside of yourself. I think it's one of the most valuable things that someone can do with their time, is to give someone else information, especially when it's good information. I think that's something that just doesn't happen anymore, is we don't have kids who just go out and just say, hey, come hit with me, because we're all on our phones, right? And I told them today, coaching can be nonverbal. You don't need to go out and just sit the guy down for an hour and a half and go over their strokes. You can just say, hey, we just got back from this academy. We're going to play short court. Show them the short court drills. Show them one bounce doubles. Show them ghost doubles. Show them shadow swinging. Show them, how you're going to hit on the backboard. It doesn't need to be, I'm going to sit down and lecture you. We're going to do notes and we're going to go over the 7 singles concepts. And so that was the first thing I told them. And then I had some personal things for the 2 boys. And this was a little arrogant of me, but I said it anyways. Older brother's got to get faster. And he's got to want to get faster. That's the bigger problem in and of itself, is that he seems to be okay with where he is. And so I told him, I was like, I'm faster than you. And to me, that's a problem. I weigh probably like 40, 60 pounds more than he does. And I destroy him when we do runs. Like we do sprints together, and I left him in the dust. And so, but he's got to be competitive with that. He's just not competitive in that sense. And then his younger brother, and there's almost a part of me that thinks I was talking to Aiden when I said this. Aiden's my younger brother. And I said, you need to just shut up when your older brother's talking to you. And it goes back to that conversation we had about the kids hearing from other coaches. You might think you're right. You might know that you're right. Shut up and listen. Listen first. Take in the information. Think about it. Internalize it. Just learn to stop talking when someone else is talking. You don't need to spit back. You don't need to give your 2 cents. You don't need to just shut up, listen, obey, do what he says. Try to do it first, because he's trying to help you. I mean, you could see it. I could see it. His older brother, Matisse, he's a good guy. And
Yeah, they're great kids.
They're great. They're awesome. I think they can go very, very far.
Yeah, you and Yvonne, I mean, Tennis Canada, I think is great that they've done this for years, is they send an old coach and a young coach.
Yeah.
Because the kids they need the difference, and they can relate more to the young coach.
Yeah. And
you need to have more than one messenger. Like say with your younger sister, if she was here, this gentleman works here, Ethan Matthews, he's got a huge personality. Yeah. And I would say, okay, Jensen, you're the message, and then Ethan's going to be the messenger.
Yeah.
And you tell my sister's got to do this, my sister's got to do this, my sister's got to do this. Because it's pretty tough to be the heavy all the time.
Yeah.
With older brothers, I think also too, they're only 15 months apart.
Right.
And that makes it tough. I have a brother who's 10 years older. So I'm 8, he's 18. He goes off to college. He comes back. He came back and lived at home, which I teased forever. And he got a PhD at that time, or that decade. It was a long time. But I think I've heard the magic number is it got to be at least 4 years older, where that there won't be that conflict. That
Right.
the younger sibling will listen to the older sibling, but someone's got to be in charge. And I've heard. I'm just thinking 2 girls that come to mind, and the younger one would always say when they're very young, "You're not the boss of me. You're not the boss of me."
No, it's shut up. Just shut up. Stop talking. Just listen to the person that's trying to help you.
Yeah, but Tennis Canada would do that. It would say an old coach and a young coach. The term headmaster, if I was the headmaster, I remember going to prep school, the person in charge was the headmaster. With that, I would make the side comment, I'm not a master pro with either the USPTA or PTR, and because you have to apply, and I would never apply. I think that is so bad to become a master pro. Have you written so many articles? Have you worked with so many advanced players? Great guy I've asked to be on the podcast, Jay Hardman. I remember he was visiting me one time with his friend Paul McDonald, and at that time I knew Paul really well. I didn't know Jay, and so I remember Jay saying, "Steve, why aren't you a master pro?" I said, "I think the whole thing's a crock." And I went on, and I said I would never ever apply to be a master pro.
Yeah.
And I said, "Why do you ask?" He goes, it was such a classic answer. He goes, "Well, I just became a master pro, and I'm pumped." With and I think all these years later, certainly he's worthy of such a title.
Yeah.
With when you played, you mentioned today, well, you thought that you had some of the same problems as this young kid, the older brother from Montreal. I said, no, I think that you were high intensity, you were rage of perfection, and he's just complacent. He's just like, he played this young girl from Minnesota today, and he was just shocked how good she was. Yeah. And it's a great story. The dad contacted Annie Fitzell, and he was working remotely with a named coach who will go unnamed. And, they exchanged film back and forth, and now she's been to visit many times. And I would say they are, like yourself, a master of the content.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you came to visit. I had no idea. Like, whoa, you have this command. I tease total recall. Yeah, I'd say I have total recall. I can recall totally what I want to.
But I just copy you. That's all I do.
Well, when you said that, I appreciate it. I heard a coach say that all great coaches are great thieves. Is steal, baby, steal. Funny guy John Verdi used to define research as steal, baby, steal.
Yeah.
And, if I like something, I say, okay, I'm going to make it a story. Where did I hear that? Who taught me that? Where was I when I learned that? And then you make it a story and you repeat it, then you own it.
Yeah.
But it's not good strategy to hear something and then pretend it's yours. Is that you won't really have a good handle on retaining that. On the other hand, Denzel Washington has a great line. We don't swear on the podcast, but you get better and better with experience. Mm-hmm. And that means bullshitting as well. So, but you had a rage of perfection. I mean, with your dad, he was, just in observing him, he to me, he was the kind of guy, I mean, he obviously played at BYU, right? Mm-hmm. So he's a college tennis player. I think he was the type of guy who's like, here's a brick wall. I heard Ron Wood say that one time about Jim Courier. There's a brick wall. He just put his head down, goes straight through the brick wall. If there's a wheel, say you wanted to get the trophy or the wheelbarrow money on the other side, he wasn't going to step back. It was just head first. But don't you think that your passion for, even though you struggled with the rage of perfection, don't you think that passion is one of the reasons that you teach so well? Because you really love tennis. Yeah. And it was at that time, again, the wires weren't connecting.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think every teacher and every coach is just trying to be the coach that they needed when they were.
Say that again?
Right. I think every teacher and every coach is just trying to be the teacher or coach that they needed when they were trying to develop and trying to become better.
Oh, that's well put.
And so I think all I'm doing is I'm looking for myself, and I'm finding these students who have a desire to learn and want to get better and want to try to get better. And I'm talking to them as if I'm speaking to myself,
But getting back to your father, I mean, obviously I have great respect for your father.
Yeah.
That's part of the LDS creed. I mean, it's
yeah.
just amazing. I said to someone the other day, I said, well, you're old man. And they didn't, this young kid, they didn't know what I meant. I go, that's your father. They looked at me like I said something bad, but brain typing. What's your father's brain type? What's your brain type?
My father is a E. I don't think he's a feeler. So I think he's a, and then the N. What does the N stand for?
Intuitive. Sensate versus intuitive.
Yeah, he's intuitive. He's an ENJ.
ENTJ? Cannot not lead?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't put anybody in a box, but it's just like, okay, all right, you got a better feel for the person or even feel for yourself.
Yeah.
And what about you?
I did the test myself. I was an ENTJ too. It was the same.
A lot of presidents are ENTJs, leaders. We always say that.
Yeah, I'm running next year.
All right. We need you to run. With, no kidding. With, how's it go? Coaches can pick their captains, but they can't pick their leaders. But I know that you are empathetic. I would have maybe guessed that you were an ENFJ. Like the other day, you saw this young kid, and, coming back to, there's this young kid who skis quite well. He's on vacation right now. We got little Ethan and big Ethan, good looking Ethan, better looking Ethan.
Yeah.
And he beat the older brother from Montreal in the spider run. And it's like, he just kind of smiles, oh, he's a better runner than I am. But it's like, no, get out there and get competitive. And we had it not only man to man with one player on the north side of the court, one player on the south as a runoff, but then you do it with the stopwatch.
Yeah.
You go, even though he's not here, he's in North and South Dakota on vacation, but with the, you just go through this is what his time was. Let's set the cones up.
Yeah.
Where we're staying, I mean, there's lots of hills up here. I mean, we're on the Wintergreen Mountain. And I told those young boys, I think you could live here 5 years and you wouldn't run up that hill unless you were told to.
No, and I'm serious. And I'd love to know what you think about when I told them if I was their coach and if I could email Patrick.
For sure.
I seriously, I would say, do not let them play for 3 months. Just don't even let them come. Don't talk to him. I mean, you can talk to him. Don't let him play. Give them time away from it, because the time that they have right now, it's harsh to say, but they're squandering it. They really are.
Well, yes. I mean, 90% are.
Not, yeah.
I mean, it's sad, but
it's so sad to watch. Yeah. But
well, if someone is injured as well, so now, not to play for 3 months, but when someone's injured, I've also told many kids, now they're too young, but I have had 3 students do this, that you would be better off to take the summer when you first turn 16, take the summer and work at McDonald's every day. And, it's just like where I would recommend to Spencer Johnson most recently. Yeah, I think my vote would be for you to go on the mission, because you're a young man and you have the rest of your life ahead of you, and you never turn away an opportunity for growth like that.
Right.
But I coming back to your dad, I thought that reflective behavior that, I didn't observe him playing long enough, but some people can have anger work for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I played, I think that anger worked for me, intensity. I mean, I'm a little guy. I was made a defenseman because a coach wanted his son to be a center. And I was made a defenseman, and your job is pretty barbaric. You basically need to make sure that the goalie can see the puck. And they've actually cleaned up the rules. But back in the day, I mean, you really could use your stick like a pitchfork.
Right.
And you may be small, but if you're good on your skates, I mean, you can get the guy away from the goalie, so you can goalie see the puck. But with yourself, to get somebody, the peaceful warrior, to be relaxed when they compete, that's where I came. The kid from Montreal, the older one, Patrick's taught him so well. And the beautiful thing about that is Patrick told me the younger one hits the ball really well. I've never taught the younger one. The older one spent time with me, quite a bit of time last summer. But the older brother taught the younger brother how to play.
Which is amazing.
According to Patrick.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that's just like your 10-year-old sister being so excited teaching this 8-year-old today. And I think that should really be something that we push with making tennis more accessible, less expensive, is peer teaching.
Yeah.
But with that, I think that it would have said that you had too much fire and this kid doesn't have a spark.
Yeah. And I would add too that growing up is sometimes the only solution to those problems, and growing up kind of showed me that you look back, and I'm sure you already know this, of course, but all that's just insecurity. All that, the perfectionism, the wanting to be better, wanting to be perfect, it's just insecurity. And I was an insecure kid. And what I found was had I instead just focused all my attention on, building up, just having a resume of skills, just like, just building this repertoire, having a 4-minute mile, I used to want to be able to hold a plank for 4 minutes. Right. But being able to do the tiebreaker test, high score on the beep test, doing the Lansdorp 20, like you just build up this resume of skills, then you're slowly going to start gaining confidence every single day, because now you're putting your focus into challenging your game and then winning at those little skills tests that you do. But instead my focus was on, am I going to win? Am I going to win today? It was hard.
The hockey in my blood is the puck goes in the corner, you go in the corner.
Yeah.
And you're going to get checked. But when somebody gets a short ball, play an approach shot, go to the net. And it's this principle. And it's just amazing how much you have to fight that, because the kids with these new rackets, they're not new anymore, but they can slap a ball.
Yeah.
And, there's no even thought of following up with a volley.
Yeah.
But the idea, you go in, you play a volley, or you play an overhead and you miss, again, if people are listening to our podcast, the kid who goes to the net misses the most overheads. To us, that's the person who's doing the best.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about playing lefty. I mean, so the listeners, we have to have Jensen. We have to have you. Can you do a podcast for us? We have a long list of people we've asked, and let's push Jensen's here. And I think it's better when we do it when a person's at the table versus on the phone. But I think people should learn how to play with their opposite hand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, one of the portable backboards, a backboard, and not being obnoxious about it. When you actually get to the point where, say, you're 17 or 18 years old, and especially with boys, you're the best player or one of the best players in your environment. No problem. I'll play left-handed.
Yeah.
And, it's been proven that you're transferring skills. If you're right and you're playing with your left hand or vice versa, you're transferring skills. But why don't you comment a little bit on playing with your opposite hand?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I got in a moped accident, and then I had a great week. I got in a moped accident, and then on my way to get an MRI, I got T-boned by a guy with no license and no insurance, totaled my car. And then at the MRI, the doctor told me, yeah, we saw something weird here. It might be a tumor on your bone. It's a scary week. This is a scary week. Luckily, we're fine here. No tumor. We're totally okay. So very lucky there. But that injury forced me to start playing with my left hand. And it's been a cool experience. I've had to feed left-handed. I've had to, just kind of rewire my brain in that sense where, now instead of standing on the right side of the basket, I stand on the left. I grab the ball with my right hand, feed with my left. But it's been fun. And I even, with those two Canadian boys here, I don't know if you, no, you did hear about this, but I told both of them, I was like, the problem is that I can beat both of you left-handed. And what did they both do? They were just like, yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, guys, if someone says they can beat you with their left hand, you got to take offense to that. There has to be some sort of pride there that says, no, you're an idiot. I can beat you. I can beat you with my right hand, but there's just nothing there. But no, I got to study Jan Tiriac a little bit because you told me that was the guy who had told McEnroe if he wanted to win the French, he should go play on the clay. He should go play tournaments left with his right hand. His
Yeah, great memory. So,
Yeah.
so you wouldn't be a shot maker.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
With Ryan Fleming, spent a couple of years playing for Chuck Creasy, who was a guest on our podcast. We have to go back and write down all the quotes Chuck had from his mom. But with Ryan, a great athlete, then he played basically in his hometown. He played at UNC Asheville. And he was playing some on the tour. He had trying the tour. He had problems with his elbow, and he was sent to me. He's like, I don't know, 28 years old. And I said, hey, learn the information, play left-handed. And I mean, he was playing as a teaching pro. He was playing in a pro league in Chicago, and playing among the best tennis teachers in Chicago. Easily a 5-0 player at that time, I'd say, with his left hand. And I used to tell the juniors that would play him, they'd be freaking out. I go, he's still the same guy.
Yeah,
he's still the same athlete. I think of my son Connor. He was a better player as a lefty tactically.
Yeah,
and I think most people are because. There's a young kid that we've worked with here in recent years, Malhar Patel. He's very skilled. I mean, he's ambidextrous, left hand, right hand. He plays very good tennis with his opposite hand. And but what they do is they realize, well, I'm not going to be playing dumb shots. I'm just going to keep my ground strokes deep and in place, centered.
Yeah.
And when I get a short ball, I'm going to recognize that, and I'm going to get to the net. And when people play with their opposite hand, they generally play that way. They play with better tactics. My son Connor would not remember this, but there was a young boy who was, he was number one in the 12s in Canada. And, the kid goes, I'm not playing him. I go, well, it's either that or you're going to tell your dad you got to go home. And I'm sure Connor would have forgot that, but is that, Connor's just going to keep the ball in play, just get a short ball and just get in.
Yeah.
Just get on top of the net. And, that's something else that's totally forgotten. But Fleming, guys don't freak out. It's the same guy, and he's got excellent tactics. So it's definitely on your serve. Don't let, it's amazing on a hard court, even two 18-year-old boys playing on an American hard court, and you're serving and the other guy ends up at the net. That's a problem. Yeah. It's like, no, it's my turn to serve. 100 years ago, I watched Nastasi playing Cliff Drysdale. And it was a very intimate crowd, maybe 3,000 people, and could hear everything. And Drysdale used to wear a glove. He had a two-handed forehand. I might have to go to the fact checker. It was a long time ago. Drysdale still does TV. He's in his 80s. I think he's 82. And Drysdale's coming in on Nastasi's second serve. Then he started coming on his first serve. And Nastasi starts waving his finger. No, you can't do that. And he goes, this is the way it works. I serve first. You have to wait for the ball to bounce. So I'm coming in first. Nastasi was so gifted. He changed his tactics. He started serving volley. Yeah. I mean, if you're playing somebody, they're always capturing the net. That's where when, Federer, of course, the grass was different. Federer had that great win over Sampras. It's kill or be killed. It used to be a definition of tennis in singles, definitely in doubles, was called capture the net.
Yeah.
So first opportunity to get in. With 21 years of age, tennis is a vehicle for life. What are your thoughts long term with teaching tennis?
It's hard to think I can do anything else. I love teaching, and whether or not I find profession elsewhere and just teaching in general, I could teach tennis the rest of my life. And I tell this to my parents, and I tell this to my students and just people around me. I could have this same job for the rest of my life. I'd be the happiest person alive. I really would be. There's no feeling like seeing someone improve. It's like that's a lasting thing that I get to affect someone's life in that way. And I get to actually help someone make a change towards a goal, towards something that they have. This week, 2 weeks ago, the draw, what are they called? The rosters started coming out for all the high schools for tennis. And I got students, I got some that are right next to me and some that are an hour 2 hours away from me. They drive, they drive 1 hour here to me, 1 hour back. And I'm just getting texts. I'm just getting flooded with messages from parents, from students saying, I made my varsity team, or I made my JV team. And these are people who I remember when they started. I have video of them when they started. I film, and we'll sit them down and we'll go through their strokes. They couldn't hit a ball. I mean, seriously, they could not swing a racket properly. And now they're on their, they're playing third singles, first year as a freshman, which we got some good players in Utah. And you start to take pride in that, and you start to kind of get addicted to that feeling of helping someone improve. And I love it. I just love it. And there's always that part of me that's like, one of these kids I'm going to take to Wimbledon. One of these kids, we're going to get all the way there. And it's probably a pipe dream, but the problem is that I truly believe that I can do it.
Oh, you can. Going back to the player, 2 hands on both sides with Peter Malik, was Greg Holmes. Greg Holmes is a really good player, top 20 in the world. And I remember watching Malik practice with him. And he goes, no, again, it was high altitude, Malik serving big. With Mark Spann, who was a guest on our podcast, he was a student at Tennis Tech program. We had a 2-year college in Texas. And, his mother won a Wimbledon title. And it was a very moving experience for him, is that he was at Weersmith, I think is the last name. But he was a South African player. He was with his mother at Wimbledon with one of his students who was playing at Wimbledon. I think at Wimbledon, the Cathedral of Tennis. I once was interviewed. Dave Wise goes, well, I think I was the first person to interview. I said, well, I think I've been interviewed before a couple of weeks ago on a podcast. I remember I was quoted as that I called Tennis Tech, this program we're running, the Cathedral of Tennis. I called Wimbledon, like everybody else, the Cathedral of Tennis. But no, tennis teaching, it can be a hobby, family, friends. It certainly can be part-time, a supplemental income. It can be full-time. I think everyone should think of themselves as a tennis teacher. It's like Raven Klaassen, speaking of Wimbledon, he was in the finals of the doubles, 5th set, lost his serve. But I mean, to be part of it, he was in the Wimbledon final. We're all pulling for him. And I always remember Roberto Callas saying, yes, he used to run our dollar clinic. And I used to always tell Raven, tell everybody that you teach tennis and play tennis. To give back, to really don't take from the sport, but give back to sport. We have talked about pickleball a little bit this week. That's alive and well in Utah. But I talked to Steve Campbell about it. He's just taking a back seat, bringing in some experts here, pickleball experts. And really, in the end, I'm saying now what we need to do is tell people, learn tennis skills for prevention of injury. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know you can't close in the kitchen. In fact, you don't have time to turn. I mean, it's a wiffle ball. You have time to turn. And, I have been told, the swing volley is prevalent, the volleying is different in pickleball. Well, sorry, Charlie, but the best pickleball players are tennis players. And if
I can't imagine how or why.
And then, as the sport has more and more money in it, we need, pickleball is a force among us. They're invading tennis centers, and we need to say, all right, learn both. And the people that are teaching, I mean, I don't think they should be winging it like people did in the 70s in tennis and making it up as they go along.
Yeah, no, the problem too is that a lot of the same tennis pros who are teaching, windshield wiper and turn the doorknob and volley like this, they're teaching that same thing for pickleball. And you see it. And so people are swinging this way when they're swinging down on the pickleball, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to be an overnight expert in pickleball.
Mm-hmm.
The USPTA and PTR, I would say they've taken the role that they were overnight experts. All of a sudden it's, they're certifying people to teach pickleball. And I think it shows a weakness that, okay, they need to have revenue streams to stay alive. You're studying business.
Yes, sir.
Today I was asked, a gal from Team Minnesota asked about a student assistant, came 2 different times. And the Johan is going to go with Chad. Barry Hill's been a guest on our podcast. And he's going to get an MBA. I mean, you can't go wrong with business. He has a grad assistantship to help the St. Leo University tennis team. They won a national title last year. Barry Hill won a junior college national title and now a Division II national title. And I told him, I said, you can't go wrong studying business. Plus the head coach and you two will click. And you got to become a lifetime learner anyway. So just because you're going to go here and be able to study sports science, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have the right professors.
Right.
But no, that's great. Accounting, are you going to make it through accounting?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
That's the make it or break it class.
Yeah.
Now, this program where you get a college degree, one was non-transferable, and there was just 2 accounting classes. Finally had a professor, staff member, instructor, teacher on the faculty back in the day. Okay, nothing was electronic. It was a ledger sheet, pencil, paper every day. And he did it where you were selling socks and selling rackets and selling shoes and balls and lessons. And but that was a tough thing with get people through that accounting class. What are some takeaways from your 10-year-old sister being here?
Oh, lunges. She needs so many more miles on her legs, I think is what you said. And it's true. And I think you once mentioned, I think it's the Australian tennis that does this. The coach's best student just stays with the coach all day as a hitting partner. Is that true?
Yeah, the Aussies used to do that. I remember Nick Bollettieri way back when, he did it with Brian Gottfried, and they'd feed a ball. Brian Gottfried became 3 in the world, and they'd just stay there, and they'd help pick up balls. But you're feeding a forehand, and Sally's hitting a cross court forehand, but your player's right next to you hitting volleys.
Yeah, right.
And why do you say that?
I think Hadley's going to start coming to all my lessons, and what I mean by that is she might not even pick up a racket, but she's gonna stand in a corner. We're gonna set up 2 cones, and she's just gonna run around the cone. She's just gonna go, and she's gonna do the sock, hit off the cone. We have a ladder at our house, and so we have that down in the tennis court. And best way I can talk to her is just say, could you imagine if every time I'm on the court you were doing that? Like, how fast could you get in a year? How much better would your legs be in a year if you did that with me? You didn't miss a day.
I have one sister who's 11 years older, one sister who's 2 years older. So for sure, for my sister, 11 years older, no chance in sports. And so way back when, so many positives with Title IX. I can remember girls would always skip rope. They're just skipping rope. They weren't playing ball. They weren't playing on the sideline. We're playing tackle football. I mean, it's back in the day, you didn't play touch football. You played. The little kids would be out there playing tackle football, and we had a baseball diamond in our backyard. Neighbors across the street had a hockey rink, outdoor hockey rink, and I remember my sister, 2 years older, is that there'd be 3 girls and they'd be swinging this huge rope, and the one in the middle is just jumping over the rope. Yep. And hockey players, I don't think anybody thought okay, that's going to help strengthen your legs, because they just didn't have the information.
Yeah.
I remember I said to your sister, Hadley, I said, in another hour, your legs are going to feel like jello. She goes, they already do. Up and down stairs, on a bench.
Yep.
Then finding ways where they don't even know they're working out.
Yeah.
Good old pogo stick. I mean, but really when you jog forward, you're using decelerators. When you jog backwards, you're using accelerators. And it's not unlike me now to have kids all day long when they pick up balls 3 and 3, and mostly just run backwards. Do 3 and 3 and run backwards.
Right.
The beep test is great, but have the people run the beep test backwards. You got to be careful. Some kids go too fast. You want them to fall back. I always tease them, if you fall backwards and hit your head, you could hurt the court.
Yeah.
But you got to really monitor young kids if their lower body's not very strong.
Yeah.
But just exploring the area here is that, okay, let's go over here. Look at these stairs, up and down the steps. With having her, and she did a great job. Say, here are routines, you're on your own. Your brother's busy. If you did take her to lessons and you set up a corner, tennis court is, it's 60 by 120. It's a lot of open space out there. You can do so much in the corner. And, hit 4 forehands off the cone and then go do 20 of these. Go do 4 forehands off of forehand, backhand. Do it precise. You go up to the fence and you can trace the swings. It's great to just go to the fence. This is my forehand volley or the forehand ground stroke where the racket goes on the fence. If people could get a copy of Teaching Children the Vic Braden Way.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing book. And, but combined, always mobility. We say, the mind, mobility, and mechanics. Yeah. When we play points, we put people in the corner. So 2 people on, 2 people off. And when you go in the corner, you have a skip rope in the corner. You have a cone, you have a sock. Typically, what our students do is what we do in the beginning. We go back to static balance. They come to see us, and that's their first impression. First impressions are everlasting. So we put them in the corner and go, no. We talked to Dave Secker about this. I spent quite a bit of time in Moscow, and not volleys, not serves, not overheads, not boys, but the girls show up like the hour before their lesson. They just go in the corner, and they really are like a shadow boxer. Their feet are moving, and they're making circular swings with good grips. And we always tell people, be a Milan farmer, just repeat.
Yeah.
But no, it's great to have you here with, what are your plans from here?
Plans from here, we have the high school season for the girls team at Corner Canyon. So we're going to go home, and I'm going to try to take everything that I learned here this trip and go throw it up on all of them, make sure that they go do it. One thing that they're definitely going to be doing a lot more of, and I can say this openly because none of them are going to watch this podcast because they don't do what I tell them.
You never know. Well, actually,
they don't do what I tell them to.
I do think that adults, with the Andy Fitzell 4-hour podcast, some of our fanatics,
Yeah.
the number has to be going down of people that have listened to every podcast.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But, we have alumni and associates. Is there, as someone who's completed a mission with the LDS Church, now that you've done that, do you mentor young people that are going to be going to do that?
I mean, yeah, there are mentorship programs. So you can go back, and we have a training center we have one in Salt Lake City, or it's in Provo. We have one in Provo. We have training centers. I think there's one in the Philippines. There's one in Mexico. So we have a few across the world, but you can sign up to go be like a teacher, and you can go be a language study person. You can go meet with the new missionaries. For me, I'm connected to a group of, elders and sisters. They're currently serving their missions, and, they have questions, they have experiences, or just things they want to know about. And I can actively help them. So Facebook can be a tool for good, and we do our best to help answer those questions that they might have. But mainly right now, in terms of that, the young men in my ward, we're just trying to make sure that they're on the right path, and that they're gonna, that they know it's an option.
One more tennis question, and then I want to come back to singing. High altitude tennis. I asked Steve Campbell about this because he's a Texan who spent a lot of time in the Intermountain. And he said anything over 4,000 feet. Up here in Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, I'm not playing tennis anymore, but I ask everybody, the ball's not flying like it does up in Salt Lake, Denver. Well, I remember tree torns, they came in a box, Pirellis, they came in a box. I remember tree torn balls were great for high altitude training because it just seems, like nobody can keep the ball in play. It's just bang, bang, bang. What are your thoughts on getting people to slow down and learning how to rally in a high altitude environment?
I tell all my students to play mini tennis. Just play hours of mini tennis, because it forces you to hit soft. Right.
It's a rule.
Yeah, it's written into it. And it changes the way that they think about playing, and we play all kinds. We'll play mini tennis where they can only hit in 2 boxes. We'll play mini tennis where they have to serve and volley. We go all through all the mini tennis 1 through 5. But yeah, that to me, that's one of the only solutions other than make them hit with an orange dot ball, which we've done before, but
And the green dot.
and the green dot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you got to force them to slow down because the kids who grow up in the Intermountain and the kids who grow up in Salt Lake, they can't even conceptualize sometimes how much slower the ball is outside of Utah. Like they'd come here and they'd think that the ball's moving in slow motion.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Then down at sea level with, I do think that the transition balls, Wayne Bryan, I think he was the first one to say it's a great tool. Wayne Bryan was somebody who's going to be at this dinner party. I was asked,
I heard.
But I said that, Wayne is fun loving, back slapping everybody. He said, no, Wayne, you got to bring your letter. And in that letter, what he said was, I think the USDA's 10 and under program is great, but they're 4 years too late. It's for 6-year-olds. This is what, it's slowing people down or holding people back too much. I try as a point to have older kids play with the orange ball.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go out and they kind of look at you. No, you can slow it down and play with this orange ball for a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not, the typecasting, it's just for little kids, people coming back from an injury. Certainly you don't want to have a kid hit for 45 minutes with an orange or green dot ball and say, okay, now go play with a yellow ball. But if you're, just, okay, there's going to be a technical day or a technical session, to slow down. But, I think that's, it's amazing though, when you meet people from a high altitude environment, they're not going to the net either. Mm-hmm. It's like, are you kidding me? You're from way up above. And Jimmy Connors, he never lost in Denver, but he was so good at staying in close and playing the ball on the rise, short, compact swings. With one thing, you're a super communicator, but one thing to go over is my fault first, but Yvonne is the manager of GreatBase Tennis. And the pressure's on him. He's in the corner with if it's going to happen, it's all on his shoulders. But no, that's where we do have a large community. We just need to have a little bit more support, and he's a guy who needs an assistant.
Oh yeah.
Like for me, people don't understand is a lot of times I don't need an assistant because I teach everybody to teach. Mm-hmm. Like the group that you met this evening, Team Minnesota, when they walked through the door, there's not only one father who's brought the other, he's the one who told the other families they should come down here, but the young girl is, like you just have a built-in staff because if you teach everyone to teach, you have all these assistants, you have an army of people helping you out. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to all these things that have to be done with a GreatBase, it's just not the same dynamic. I think one thing I need to do is talk about singing. We can take a break so we can just change the camera and such, because we can't have you sing the national anthem. We're both wearing a hat and we're both sitting down. We have to take the hats off and stand up. So we'll take a break for like 1 second and rearrange that. But the singing, I tell juniors, and I remember being taught this, and I did this with people I was trying to teach tennis, and make them stand up on a table. My students trained me how to train tennis teachers because, there was just like so much ego and so much craziness. Students used to, their first day on campus, they would go into a room, and one of my co-workers, a lab assistant, basically a former student who might have just been 1 year ahead of them. First year student, they go in, they pull one of 7 pieces of paper out of the hat, and it was forehand volley, forehand ground stroke. We have the 42-second drill if you're doing 7 strokes. We have the 48-second drill if you're doing 8 strokes. Some people have both. The little kids have a 2-handed backhand volley and a 1-handed backhand volley. And what we would do very first day is we would record their understanding, how they would communicate how to teach the serve or the forehand. And it was down together, up together, scratch the back. And, some of these people coming, I used to tell them, you got a pretty big ego. I mean, the U.S. Open's going on and you're here every fall. And it was just, we had two types of students, the ones that we had to hold back because they had too much ego, and the ones that we had to push forward because they didn't have enough ego. On the forehand was take your racket back and come over the top of the ball and stay down. And they were just in, and they were supposed to go 3 minutes, and no one, basically, they didn't have 3 minutes of information. 3 minutes is a long time. So from that experience, I'd like to have kids, they say, okay, it's got to be a clean joke. You can tell a joke, you can tell a story, or you can sing a song. You mentioned insecurity. It's amazing how many people just tighten up.
Yeah.
They tighten up so much, and you go, well, I'm going to try to get you to perform out on a tennis court. That's going to be your stage. And, you can't, but, there's been great players like, Andy Murray or Del Potro, where, they very critical of, like the worst part of their tennis was when they had to give their acceptance speech. I don't think that's the case now, but anyway, the 4th of July, I didn't do that this year, but we've done it year after year. And it's amazing. I mean, certainly with someone like yourself, you just took it way up a level, way up in the performance, the standard, the level of it.
I don't know about that.
No, years gone past, but if you practice it, I mean, I think a lot of people go, oh, say, the story maybe I've told before, Maru Yamohiro Michi-san, he trained with us, a Japanese coach, lived with us, and he, now he's back in junior tennis, but for the longest time he coached, I should just rattle off his name, the Japanese player won so many majors. I remember my sons, I was in Japan, they had a chance to practice with this young man. At that time, he was a teenager. So I don't do many adult clinics, but I've done my share over almost 50 years. So I was doing a July 4th adult clinic. And there was 8 coaches. I was the only American. Tennis is such an international game. The other day, a woman from Texas who's living in Nigeria or Kenya. She's living in Africa. She's in Africa. And she has a coach who's from Lithuania, who's currently in Spain, who's going to come here and be trained to teach her daughters. I mean, that's pretty international. So these coaches were lined up to sing the national anthem. And what I did is I told a joke, so I didn't have to sing. I said, everybody's going to sing just a few verses from their country song. And that expression with the French kids this week, I mean, there's always something lost in translation. So I get up and I say, well, there's this young player from Mexico named Jose, and he wanted to see a pro baseball game in San Diego. So he goes across the border, but he doesn't have a ticket. So he climbs a flagpole to watch the game. So he goes home, and his mother says to Jose, how'd you like the baseball game? He goes, baseball was great, but I couldn't believe how friendly the Americans were. And she said, why? He said, well, when the game started, they all stood up and said, Jose, can you see? Anyway, I told that. But so anyway, Maru, I mean, I had so many experiences with Maru. Here's a situation. Took Maru to Bollettieri's and Hotman's. Just called up and said, hi, I'm so-and-so. And they knew me anyway. And I said, I've got a coach from Japan, and Munihiro Yoshida would like him to spend time at your facility. And he has an electronic dictionary, Maru. So picking on these 2 different establishments so we paid fees to go to these places, 3 days at one, 3 days at the next. I remember it was Eric Hansen who had won a national title in the 12s. That's by the time it was a national 2. It wasn't a national 1. Upstate New York kid. And he's on the center court at Saddlebrook. And they're changing his volley. And he was a little kid who had a 2-handed volley, went forward, like Samper's 2 hands. And, they were changing it where they're just having him knife downward. And I'm just going, whoa. So anyway, you took the electronic dictionary, typed in bullshit, caca de toros, shit of the bull. And then what's a kick up in Japanese? And Andy Fitzgerald said the other day on a podcast, you can learn so much. We need to take a podcast and just talk about Nick. But we come across as being arrogant because from a technical standpoint, it's amazing how many people are really, they're ignorant of technique. But so anyway, Maru singing, and that's where I found out that all the Japanese kids, Kimi and Gaio, they can all sing their own national anthem. But he didn't get the joke. He didn't get the spoof. And it shouldn't be a joke, someone's national anthem. But he had a musical background. The story keeps going. So he just looks up at the heavens and sticks out his chest, and he sings the entire Japanese national anthem. And at first people are snickering a little bit, but then it was total respect. So the story keeps going. So he goes back to Japan. And at that time, it was a 3-year cycle. I went to Japan quite often. I remember they had a party because they had their first national junior champion using the GreatBase. So again, lost in translation. So Maru goes back to Japan, and Minahiro Yoshida says, what do they do in American tennis? And he goes, they sing all the time. Because once I knew every Japanese kid, to just break the ice, okay, you come on in, we'll sing. They would sing their national anthem, we would sing our national anthem, and we would start off a clinic. And, pretty traditional, pretty formal. So he says that. So what they did is they hired a coach. They hired a singing coach. And the entire staff, they had a training session every Wednesday. And in Japan, I would hope it's still the same way. You could finish a tournament on Saturday. You're going to stay overnight in a hotel to come back on Sunday to accept your trophy. I mean, our society, the Japanese society, there's just so much respect. And to the point where some things where the younger player is not even supposed to beat the older player. Right? I mean, it just gets a little bit out of whack. But from a singing standpoint, I go over there and I'm just shaking my head going, that's the last thing I had on my mind. But that's how much it evolved. So it's called the Tennis Training Center in Chiba, Japan. And they were training their coaches to sing. And the coaches would sing. They would perform. They got so good, they would perform at the trophy presentations.
Wow.
And I'm just going, whoa. Some things don't, you think about things lost in translation. I mean, Yalta 1943 with Stalin, Roosevelt, help me out, Churchill. This was one that was a little bit lighter than what went down. But I appreciate you being on the podcast. I think we take a time out. We'll end with you singing the national anthem. It's going to be good to hear you do that because you're awesome at it. Yvonne is the manager. We put all the pressure on him with the GreatBase. Thank everybody for continuing to support the GreatBase. Before you sing, any closing comments?
Gosh, if I just had to close, well, thank you for having me in Hadley. I appreciate you guys. And,
it was fun. Wow.
Yeah.
She's a great kid. It's always, especially to be around young kids. To me, for tennis teachers, how can you look someone in the eye and you're winging it, you're making it up, and you never got a kid to serve before, and the tennis clubs, don't even get me going, don't even have orientations, and then what happens is the younger players get the least experienced teachers. Typically what happens at a tennis facility is the director has the best background as a player. They have a salary. They're getting a commission from so many people that are on the staff. And all they do is, pick out the better kids and they kind of give a hitting lesson. And then, and the consumers don't really know, hey, this isn't working. And in the end, is there any accountability? Like, okay, this facility has been here a long time. Where are the names of the kids that have gone on and played college tennis from this facility? But I guess a mind vitamin for your daughter, excuse me, that's so much respect. I've said that a few times. That much respect I have for you. It's calling your younger sister, you're the oldest of 5, that the legs feed the wolf.
Yeah.
Herb Brooks, the late Herb Brooks. But listeners, we're going to sign off. This is the first time we've done it with the national anthem. Give me the high five. This guy can sing. All right, let's check out and check back in.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land